Imagine this. You're knee deep in a high stakes project, buried under mountains of emails, docs, and meeting notes that could hide the next big risk or opportunity. What if an AI could sift through it all in seconds, spotting patterns that you never saw, predicting pitfalls, or even drafting your escape plan? That's the magic of large language models. But are we using them correctly to harness their full potential? And are they mature enough to do the work we need them to do? Today, in episode 2 of the Powering ProjeX AI series, we're demystifying LLMs. So buckle up as we dive into real world wins, ethical pitfalls, and how this tech is reshaping project management forever. At Powering ProjeX, we champion the growth of project people, empowering every subscriber to lead with distinction, drive impactful outcomes, and turn vision into victory. Through sharp insights, inspiring stories, and energetic conversations, we will celebrate the exceptional people who transform industries and build a better world. Welcome to the Powering ProjeX podcast, where we explore the strategies, stories, and insights that make projects thrive. I'm your host, DK, and today we're aiming to demystify LLMs. But before we kick off, if you want to join a community that puts your career first, gain global connections, cutting-edge skills, and hear from voices just like yours who are shaping the project management industry, subscribe to the podcast now. And with no further ado, let me introduce you to the 3 people I always enjoy talking to. Welcome to Ryan Chafee, our resident transformation, governance, and project portfolio management specialist. Welcome to David Mile, General Manager Extraordinaire, whose role encompasses strategic and operational leadership in the software and IT consulting industries. Welcome to Andrew McNeil, a veteran software developer and business analyst, and also the author of Towards Consciousness, a thought-provoking exploration of AI and consciousness. Sadly, Luke Belfield is away on leave this month and won't be joining us today, but we're thinking of him. So welcome, guys.
Good morning.
All right, so let's jump straight in. The problem statement for today. Project managers often drown in unstructured data from emails, documents, and meetings, struggling to uncover insights, forecast risks, and drive better outcomes, while ethical pitfalls like bias and privacy loom large. Today, we'll debate the use of LLMs, the successes and failures, the future potential for expanded integration into daily workflows, as well as the risks. But first, our hot takes for this week. So, Ryan, hot take?
So I've been looking at the LLM tools and looking at how organizations have been adopting them. And I think change management is the real AI accelerator. The models out there are by far more than enough to totally transform organizations. Where the outcomes are, I think, with AI and LLMs in particular, they're being constrained more by people, process, and policy. I think that AI needs to be treated like any other operating model change. A recent MIT report showed that the success of generative AI trials showed that only 5% of organizations are actually extracting value with the failing of implementation driven by their approach.
Mm-hmm. Did they say anything about what the approach was? Like, what was it about the approach that drives these failures?
So I think organizations go too fast too quickly, don't understand the impact on people and process, and they don't pilot in a way that kind of tests the value incrementally. They try to go too large, spend too much money, and business cases are then and projects are then stopped because they're not getting the value as quick as what the senior leaders expect to get out of it.
That's really interesting. All right, David, over to you.
Thank you. So my hot take is like everything AI, LLMs are getting better all the time, very quickly, getting a lot smarter, getting a lot bigger, a lot more tokens, etc. I would suggest that people look at the different LLMs for different tasks. So obviously, OpenAI is pretty prolific with ChatGPT and its Microsoft partnership, but experiment a bit with some other tools. I use Chat a lot for work because it's secure. The data doesn't leave our own tendencies. So that's really helpful for research type tasks. I'm a big fan of Perplexity because it gives you really good access to sources, so you know where the information is coming from. So plenty of other great tools out there as well. So so my hot take is for LLMs. Experiment with different LLMs. Don't just continue to use the same one. You'll get different results from different models.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. I've had so much experience with that this week. All right. And Andrew, what about yourself?
Well, building a little bit on what David was talking about, using the different LLMs is useful in order to see where their changes are and where their actual directions are. All of them will claim to be designed to be helpful, but some of them are more helpful than others. But comparing the two, there are three of them or four of them, however many you want to link to, is important depending on the task. Now, all of them are starting to offer coding specific. Some of them offer more picture equivalents. So everybody's trying to get in on the same area that they can start working with. But they all offer. Sometimes they'll build code that will actually run right off the bat, and other times they'll just miss out on the little things. They're generally trained on the same level of data and the same context of data. But when you give them information, what's useful from what David was saying as well is ask them exactly the same question with exactly the same information. You will typically get a different response back, which is a nice thing to be able to bounce things off of and treat it very much like that. Ironically, whenever I was asking a certain question and asking for examples on one thing, they all came back with exactly the same example. I was asking for a scenario of automation, and all three, Claude, Gemini, and ChatGPT, all came back with exactly the same comment about thermostats. And I stopped and I said, "Well, what about Roombas? What about other devices?" And they said, "Oh, sorry, I guess that's trained on." So it's kind of it's a real thing to be very important to note where they get trained on, but also to ask them and compare the results to find the one that you are, I'm not going to say happiest with, but
Yeah.
perhaps more challenged by, in order to get the
Yeah.
right results that you want to.
There was a case in Australia actually where a lawyer used an LLM for case precedent, and he used other LLMs to review the output of the first LLM, thinking that that would actually solve the hallucination issues. They all made the same mistake. So that goes to your point. It's like sometimes there's limitations across the whole board.
Yeah. Well, there was a great post this morning, once again from the All In podcast, where they had interviewed this week a gentleman called Demis Hassibi, I think he is, who won the Nobel Prize in AI. But he actually said this morning the issue with LLMs is that he thinks that it's missing two breakthroughs that are still required in order to achieve general intelligence. So he said you often hear from our competitors talking about these modern systems have PhD levels of intelligence. He said that he thinks that's nonsense, that they're not PhD intelligence level. They have some capabilities that are at that level, but they're not in general capable. So he was actually saying that I would say that it is about 5 to 10 years away from having an AGI system that's capable of doing these things right across the board. How do you feel about that?
Well, there was actually another article about one of the head people over at Meta, and I was trying to find the link and I couldn't find what it was noted on LinkedIn. But he was talking about how he was over LLMs.
Yes.
He didn't want to bother with LLMs at all because all they could
Yeah.
do was read. All they did was have the information that they read about information. And what was interesting was he was saying it needs to get out there. It needs to see the world as
Correct.
opposed to just read about the world. And and when I read that, I immediately thought about, but you go to a library to read, you find information on people that have read, and those are the experts that you typically try to use for the information that you need. So it was one of those interesting, I'm done with LLMs, they need to get beyond that point, but you still want the value of the
Yeah.
fact that
It
they are
was
well read.
Is it Yun LeCan or is it uh
The French guy at Meta. Yeah, it was
Correct.
him. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it was him
Yeah.
yesterday. I actually saw the post myself. He made a very, very valid point.
And I was sorry if I can
Another
just jump in. I was listening to him on Star Talk recently with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and they were talking about, or Neil, in fact, was bringing up the point that as far as general intelligence goes, because they only know what they've been fed, can they come up with a unique thought? Right. So, are they capable of discovering something new? And I don't think we know the answer to that yet. But
Well, it is interesting that you bring this up, because recently I've done lots of research for various issues, and I actually asked two LLMs to help me devise a unique product in the project management space. And I was actually quite surprised by what they came back with, and it was really good quality. It was absolutely able to see gaps in the market that I had never seen before. And when I went through it and dug a little bit deeper, and I had a very long conversation about it and just kept building on the idea, I was quite surprised. It was quite unique. So I actually think it's showing signs of capability, but it really is about the question that you asked.
And the quality
Yeah.
of the LLM as well. It's really about the training data that it's been given, and that's the key thing that you think about when you're dealing with the LLM. Is you sometimes you just think, oh, it has a lot of information, but it is what is that information that it has to do the original thought. And where did it come up with the original thought? Well, as you were just saying, it's comparing two things and seeing what is unique. But it is still basing it on, I mean, where does anybody else come up
I
with
think
unique?
it's comparing unique things in a way that humans possibly can't connect the dots with such large, sways of data. I think that's where the originality, or the seemingly originality comes from.
Go ahead. I was going to say, it's like a neural network when they feed it all of the data, and then all of a sudden it comes back with this brand new piece of information that they never thought they never knew about before. Well, it's in the data. It was just hiding in the data, and it just needed somebody to extract from it. So it's able to find those things, Brian, similar to what you were saying. The things that nobody could figure out the connections before, it's able to find them.
Yeah, and I think they've done some. I think I remember something with some sort of protein research or something. Just sort of putting different proteins together creates something which, again, the data was there, it could have been discovered, but the compute power just and reasoning methodology of an LLM just meant that it could do it quicker and better, and no one else had done that math before, so to speak. So.
Correct. That was from the medical industry. I remember reading that myself. Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that I came up with this week, a gentleman called John Lowry wrote and published an article on LinkedIn in early September that was titled Kickstarting Construction Productivity and Profit. And he actually argued that AI and large language models represent a game-changing opportunity to unlock exponential productivity and profit gains, but only if the industry overcomes its self-imposed barriers of siloed data and risk-averse processes. And he goes into quite a lot of detail, stressing that AI and LLMs thrived on shared data, and their limited current impact stems from data being locked into echo chambers due to adversarial contracts. And it made a
Sorry, no, I absolutely agree. And from a consulting point of view, going and talking to organisations, and again, I'm biased because I come from a data background, but it's all about the data, right? So different from traditional data warehousing type fashion is that we're now talking about unstructured data as well. So all new of people's thinking of data warehouse and single data repositories, because it's not just about your CRM, ERP, HR type of data anymore. We're now talking about your documents in SharePoint, that sort of knowledge, or any other document repository. Emails, I'm not sure I'm on the email bandwagon yet, but organizations are. So, yeah, absolutely. It is definitely all about the data. And a project that I was involved in recently, very large data migration for one of the big four banks here in Australia, and that was all about to 1,000 AI use cases that they had in backlog, but they didn't have the data platform to support it. So it was about moving from a legacy on-premise type of data platform to a cloud-based, to allow them to start to explore those use cases.
All sorts of flashbacks from enterprise data lake build, which is scaring me now. But yes, any other thoughts on any of those issues? No.
Well, it would be interesting to find out where each industry gets, or what type of information does come out of each industry when they are analyzing that data. And right, you want to give it the data, but you asking for it to pull down all of the information if it's not available. If they anonymize it, or how do they pull out, how can people actually get value of it? But it was also kind of coming back to one of the comments, Ryan, that you made earlier on about how people don't want to talk about how their 5% of their projects didn't work. And you're saying, well, where's the data on it? It's like, well, do you really want to share the fact that you blew it? Nobody wants to share the data of what worked, and because it's a competitive advantage, but nobody also wants to share the data of what didn't work, because sometimes you'll look at it and go, well, that's a little too obvious. But it would be really interesting to see if it could find, similar to the proteins, things that industries aren't thinking of in those areas, and see where it took it from there.
I think that mining project failures for reasoning, understanding, guidance for future projects is absolutely a winner. And I would be so interested in understanding how we can build a group of like-minded industry partners. It's only going to take one group for this to start. And I think if we can find one group within an industry, 2 or 3 organizations that are willing to pool their data and actually mine that for learnings for project delivery, I think it would be an absolute winner, and it would set a precedent for many other industries. And I think that's where John Lowry was going with his point, because he's really talking about how do we become, how do we build a scenario where AI and LLMs aren't futuristic hype, but they're really tools for immediate data-driven transformation that can be, used across industries. And I think it will happen at some stage. Could you see any of your clients, organizations, your own organization sort of buying into pooling your project data for benefits?
Well, we've seen it for, it's all about the dollars, right? So we've seen it for, for retail, banks have, credit card spend, and there's aggregators of that data that then go on and sell it, right? So the business model, it's a viable business model that's been proven. Whether there'll be some sort of, collective that will do that for the betterment of the world, no, probably not. But if someone can make a buck out of it, yeah.
And you'd end up finding out what people don't want to see. You'd find out all the things that people are really spending money on that they really don't want necessarily to be. Everybody's spending a little bit of money on the things that they shouldn't be spending on, but don't want other people to think that they should be spending money on. Too much gym equipment or too much food.
Interesting. All right, all great takes. And now we'll dive into the discussion for this month. So the overall consensus for LLMs in 2025 is optimistic yet cautious. They are hailed as transformative for automating routine tasks, enhancing predictive analytics, and boosting efficiency in project management. But they're no silver bullet, with limitations in accuracy, bias, and over-reliance on human insight. As Gartner notes in their 2025 Hype Cycle of Artificial Intelligence report, using AI practices and techniques such as LLMs, organizations are creating and deploying AI agents to achieve complex tasks. But they predict a shift towards small, task-specific AI models 3 times more than general-purpose large language models by 2027 for better accuracy in domains like project management. So McKinsey echoes this in their 2025 workplace report, emphasizing how LLMs are boosting intelligence and reasoning in tools, empowering PMs with super agency for tasks like forecasting and decision-making, potentially unlocking 4.4 trillion in added productivity growth potential from corporate use cases. So on social media, particularly X, the conversation is buzzing with enthusiasm for LLM's productivity boosts, like automating workflows in construction projects to save tens of millions in labor hours at scale. So one user noted that LLMs increase productivity, but they're also going to increase stress. Already in tech hiring, responsibilities that would be filled by multiple people are now expected to be done by one person. Others praise them as smart assistants for tasks like risk prediction and context-rich summaries, yet criticize how they suck at writing code full of bugs or lead to verbose, inelegant solutions that require constant human correction. So, a Stanford researcher shared his findings that LLM ideas result in worse projects than human ideas in research contexts, underscoring the need for strong guidance. But on the flip side, proponents argue that LLMs, they destroy the desire to learn anything. And this particular X user wrote, I'm learning more faster now, enabling immediate trial and error without months of upfront study. So, looking ahead, Gartner forecasts that by 2030, 80% of project management tasks will be run by AI, evolving into cognitive agents for agile project management and fostering collaboration, while McKinsey sees a rise, AI agentic mesh for enterprise-wide automation networks. But skeptics warn of fumbles like how LLMs required a human to review and correct data errors, and that wipes away any productivity gains. PMI envisions a future where project pros seamlessly integrate AI into your project management processes, from scheduling and budgeting to resource allocation and beyond, but only with skills like data literacy and ethical oversight. So I'm going to hand over to the panelists now. What are the undeniable wins for LLMs in project management today? And what are the major red flags? And how do ethics factor into it? And what will be the practical evolution? Ryan, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Daniela. So for me, I guess the undeniable wins for LLMs in project management is around turning the exhaustion of project teams into project insight. So you kind of mentioned the research around offloading admin and the speed at which administration can be done with LLMs. So from actions to RAID logs to status packs. I think another value of LLMs and generative AI more broadly is they're great at summarizing activity and data across multiple tools, which allows you to take those disparate sources of information to surface emerging risks and dependencies. And then lastly, an undeniable win for LLMs is decision support. So scenarios, pros and cons of decisions, and forecast narratives. But I think for me, some of the limitations of the technology is its reliability and accountability. So the way the models work, the way they can hallucinate, the way that the data that they've trained on has a level of bias in it. And then obviously then there's the considerations around privacy and intellectual property leakage. From an ethics perspective, I think it's really important to really define when organizations adopt these tools to really be clear on the consent and the purpose. So defining what data the AI can see and why, being able to explain decisions, which is not always easy when you're using a neural network and there's no documentation as to how the LLM arrived at an answer. And I think also worker impact. So you mentioned, increasing workloads on people and stress for all the change that this technology is bringing. I think that's really important. Where I think it's going, I think you mentioned potentially around moving from more general LLMs to task-specific models, an LLM for scheduling, an LLM for risk management. I think to kind of minimize hallucinations, the more and more that the AI can pull answers from project facts, so retrieval, augmentation, and generation. And then lastly, the evolution will be more and more automation of PM tasks, taking away the admin, but ensuring that PMs then aren't getting overburdened by trying to check the outputs of the systems due to their limitations.
This is all true. Can I go back to a point you made, Ryan, about intellectual property and leakage? And I find that really, really interesting. When you talk about IP leakage, can you give me an example?
So I think if these organizations are deploying these AI tools into their infrastructure, I think it's going to be really important when these tools are sucking in this information. Potentially, some of that information might be competitive advantage, like information that would provide or prove be very valuable to competitors. I think it's going to be really important for organizations to really monitor and contain how that data is used and where it's used, particularly if they're relying on an external vendor to provide that AI infrastructure to their organization.
Because I'm just thinking through with project delivery, right? So I'll give you an example. I worked with an organization a couple of years ago and we were implementing a whole heap of stuff. So we were doing some audit remediation. So basically we'd receive some red cards from an auditing body. We had to go and fix certain things. And one of the things was we had to put in a new version of Salesforce. Now, I don't see any of that as being their IP. Yeah, but the way that we delivered that project and what made it successful as opposed to organizations that might try and implement Salesforce and do it really badly and fail at it, I don't see any of that as being intellectual property. And yet, if I approached that organization and said, let's pull some of this data so that we can have some really great improvements across the industry, they probably would see it as not necessarily intellectual property, but potentially commercial and sensitive, which I find really bizarre and obscure. Does anybody else have a thought on this?
Well, I can give a slightly different example. We have organisations I've currently work for, have some accelerators and such, for different technology stacks. It's a bit legacy now. It was for on-prem, in a multi-vendor sort of environment where we saw something outrageously similar to that being implemented by another vendor in another organisation, right? So, when it comes to things like that, I think that's pertinent. Land as well that I won't bore you with, but I think that you've got the secret sauce. You don't want the seven herbs of spices to be given to everyone out there.
Because you
Absolutely.
don't necessarily know what those seven spices are when you're looking at that data. People may start off by saying this information is what's valuable to us, but at the end, it may have been three other pieces of information that was valuable. And if you were to share all of that information industry-wise, then you can see where it's not even just competitive advantage. It's also, it could be ground shaking for those businesses that have said, we're going to ignore those other three pieces. So, it does create a scenario where whoever's fastest to market is one, but then if everybody else is jumping on board, the ones that are maybe perhaps a little bit slower or have decided to look at other areas may end up being lost behind simply because they decided to share the data. And I think that is a concern that companies will have on the whole, which is why it also speaks to the ability of, we were talking about LLMs, but LLMs are the basic conversation piece, but it is possible for those organizations to bring what they refer to as an additional layer of training that does get handled over to the actual LLM when it's doing its processing. So it doesn't have to be shared necessarily, but it does come back to it. So it does have all of its data that's in there. But the sharing of data is really going to be a tricky scenario to see it come through.
Interesting. David, over to you for your thoughts.
Okay, I'm going to take a slightly different approach. So I was all about SLMs, small language models, or subject area language models, about 18 months, 2 years ago or so, and then saw data on more than one occasion to show that using a large language model with relative augmented generation with RAG was giving better outcomes. So I'm bringing that up because, again, something that I mentioned last time is that what was once true may not be, and then it may be again, so to speak, right? So, now it seemed I was a bit surprised about this, about SLMs or Gartner mentioning SLMs, because it was in trend quite a while ago and then fell out of trend for a little while. So, but being the facetious individual that I am, I do wonder, given the number of projects that fail, you could question how many organizations would have enough content from successful projects to create a project management SLM, right?
Yeah.
Could be written on the back of a postage.
But isn't it
So,
important to know why you
Andrew.
failed? You've got the value of it. I mean, it's about the sharing. I mean, who's going to
Yes,
tell
it
you
is.
how many times they failed? But from that perspective, are they going to tell you all of the times they succeeded in order to give away their secrets, but also to not know where it is failing? I always look at it from, it would be so beneficial to know the failure steps that you've had, to then move on those a little bit later on. So you're not going to forget about them the next time.
Sure. Yep. That's a good point. I am a fan of the small language model. Yeah, I am a fan. I was then. If it is coming back into vogue, I'll definitely pick up the pom-poms for that again. That's for sure. So, but something that many people may not have thought of, and I hadn't until I was introduced to an organization, is that currently AI is a single-player game. We are using models individually on our machines. We are asking questions to models. It may be a different model. I may be using a different one to Ryan or Andrew or whatever. And in most cases, although it's getting more mature, it's not a team game. So projects are very much a multiplayer game, obviously, right? So there's a risk that different people on the same project could be getting vastly different summaries, answers, recommendations based on what's being fed into the model. I noticed just yesterday there was an article on IT News saying that Westpac here in Australia is rolling out Copilot Studio in a very large way, which obviously brings up a whole bunch of questions about governance and guardrails and things like that. We could probably fill a whole episode with that later, so I won't jump into that. But if project managers or people in the same project are able to build their own agents, as I said, you could get vastly different answers based on what is being fed into that model. As we know, the project director, they're always projecting sweetness and light upwards and getting the respective praise back to them. Whereas, someone down at perhaps the Scrum Master level may be seeing a sea of red from their model, right? So, and never the twain do meet, right? So, so I guess, there are some organizations out there that are trying to solve this problem and make AI a multiplayer game. But at the moment, it is not. And I think that's a significant risk when it comes to not just project management, but when it comes to a number of different team activities, is, how do we get everyone singing from the same hymn sheet? Now, that also comes back to, again, having a single trusted data repository, I guess, as well. So there's a number of things there, but at the moment, I think that's one of the big things that a lot of people don't think about, is that we need a tool where, and I've seen one in particular that looked really, really great, and it is specifically for projects, where everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet, as it were. Everyone goes into an interface. You can choose the LLM that it's using. It's using the same internal data and such. So, but I think that's something that we need to consider when it comes to any sort of project or team-based activity.
I think what you've said is brilliant. It is absolutely what it needs, because if I think about when I'm project managing, one of the biggest frustrations I have is teams. And the reason why is that you can start a conversation with anybody in the project that everyone else cannot see. And I have absolutely if you've made progress, if you're talking about risks, what those risks are, I require someone to be honest and come and let me know what's going on, but I cannot see it for myself. And invariably at several points throughout the project, I will say, how are you going with that? And they'll say, oh, we've made some progress. And I think, well, I can't see it. No one's emailed me because everything's happening in these private Teams chats. And what I love about what you're saying is, if an LLM had access to that within the organization, within the project, then we would all be better off, because we would be able to see what progress is being made, if it's stalled, what's happened, what hasn't happened, so on and so forth. But then I further love what you're saying about having a multiplayer sort of LLM, where I wonder if LLMs could be built in a way that the entire project team has access to it. Everyone can see the conversations that are going on there and ask similar questions or the same questions or nuanced questions, but we can all see what the LLM is actually coming out with.
Sure, and that's exactly what this tool does. Sorry. That's exactly what this tool does. And you can create project teams for different projects and assign them to them, and everyone can see what everyone else is asking and that type of thing. And that's not an LLM thing. That's just an interface to the LLM. So it's actually not rocket surgery to do that, right? This is an interface on top, as opposed to the way the LLM works. So in this case, you actually choose the LLM that you're going to base it on, and you've got a whole bunch of choices like you do in tools like Amazon Bedrock and such. So
So are you saying that's what they are?
There's a software company that's delivering that service, selling that as a software.
But also OpenAI does offer their ChatGPT 4 teams, where they do have that joint experience, or the joint workspace that teams can work with. Now, obviously, now you're dealing with ChatGPT, which is far more broad as an LLM. But since you are able to share those discussions, and everybody's able to get into those discussions, and they are effectively using the same LLM, the prompts may be different, but now that they're in a shared workspace, everybody can see that result, and it's shared for everybody to work with. That immediately opens up, I think, Ryan, you mentioned earlier on about privacy, and where people really start thinking, well, how much do I want to share in that regard? Or do you flip back and forth between the private chats or GPTs that you're working with, or if you flip over to other ones? But I'm sure if OpenAI has one, the other tool, the other various LLMs, the larger ones, probably are offering something very similar. But it's similar to dealing with the code base. When you're dealing with anything, I guess it comes down to how much people want to share their individual chats, if they're asking it to do more things than somebody would normally expect them to. But no, OpenAI does also have that teams matter. Now it comes into, I think, David, you mentioned it earlier on, is the cost. How much are they really going to want to spend on putting that in and using it? And then the training.
Sure. And just one thing on the sharing factor, I think, personally, people are prepared to, there's a ratio between what you're prepared to share and what value you're getting out of it, right? So, so if you are getting value out of it, you're more likely to share more information. I think that's probably the key there, right? If you're, sharing all, if you're the prompt guru and you're sharing all your cool prompts to everyone, but you're not really getting any value out of the tool, maybe you're not going to do that. I'd hope that people would, though. But yeah, if you're, sharing a lot, but the team and therefore yourself is getting a lot of value out of it, then, I think you're more likely to share, aren't you?
So is being the prompt guru the top of the food cycle? Is that really it?
I don't think so. I think the idea is it's one of those learning modes type of thing. It's kind of like when you in Agile, when you have a Scrum Master who helps lead the discussion, but I don't think it's one where they immediately come back and say, this is the person that we all go and sit at the altar of the great prompter for all of the information, because everybody does have a lot of that information inside them. They're just going to ask it slightly differently. And this also gets into the idea of the LLMs and what gets shared and what doesn't get shared. Because when we were describing, we can use a small language model or a large language model, but we're going to maybe silo in some of our data. and we're going to limit down the data that we're looking at, maybe just for certain projects or other projects. One of the things that we're missing on that then is the ability for it to find synergies between different projects. So if you've got a organization who says we're going to create a shared space or an LLM that's specifically for our human resources, and we're going to create another one, we're going to have a separate one that's running over for our project management and whatever, you're missing out on the opportunity for all of those synergies to come together. And we started off by talking about creative LLMs and are they really creative or not? Well, if you've only given them a small set of data, even with a large language model that's been given a huge amount of data, but if you're talking about your business or your projects, if you still only give them a little bit of data, you're not going to get the full benefit of having it learn new things that it's working with.
Makes perfect sense. All right. I think, Andrew, you're next. So maintain the
Well,
microphone.
it's very similar to what I was referring to earlier on about sharing the level of data that you need to share with the LLMs to give it that immediate benefit. And it's a huge win when you're talking in software projects, when you're talking about coding differences. You want to make sure that you can immediately see where people are getting the benefit from it, and everybody in the organization is doing it. But everybody does need to take advantage of it. And if one person's doing it and the other person's not, then this is really a case where we were talking earlier about teams, where that team building exercise around the use of these LLMs is important, because you're going to miss out on that. I keep on coming back to the creativity that we started off with, but even those missed links that you don't end up seeing between projects. And I think that has a huge benefit especially when you're looking at a larger organization where one project manager may not know what the other project manager is working on. There are synergies there. And that is the huge opportunity for it to work together. And I think that's the key. That's the key thing that I always look at when I think about organizations using the tool. Everybody's got different silos. And one of the departments that I work with, from a government client, they all want to use it. They all want to use LLMs. They all want to use AI, but they're in those different areas. They aren't actually talking together about how to use it as a whole organization. And as a result, you're going to probably have one system that seems to be pumping out regular customer communication if you're using it for communication with clients, and another organization or another part of the organization that's just not using it at all. And that creates for an organization a potential public relations problem, because one group seems to be doing better than the other when they both have the opportunities to do the same.
Mm-hmm. I love what you're saying for two reasons. Number one, dependency management across a large portfolio is one of the most difficult things to do. I worked for an organization once who had a Miro board where we would all go and write up our projects on this Miro board, and we would discuss it once a month. And the whole point of the Miro board was to say, I have a dependency on another project. But the thing was, dependencies exist at a very deep technical level. When you have a whole heap of scrum masters, agile specialists, PMs who are sitting at a very sort of high level in the project, don't have the most nuanced technical understanding of what is being built, it is very, very difficult for me and others to have a proper discussion about dependencies and technical dependencies and how things have to be orchestrated in order for the portfolio to deliver. And I always found that increasingly difficult. And the larger the portfolio, the more difficult it becomes. And I think that it is an area where if LLMs and these team-based LLMs were able to assist, it would make a massive, massive difference to a lot of organizations. And the second bit I'd touch on is around project structure, because one of the things I find really difficult, or that I see organizations find difficult, is where projects are liked and should be grouped as a program, and how programs should be structured when things are, alike or maybe, have the same benefits, but are being done by separate people across the organization in different silos. And one particular program person who I have worked with over the years, and I won't name him, but a really lovely gentleman, and he always said, we worked in an organization where lots of different silos wanted to build components of the car, but no one could see that we would not actually develop a car as a result. Right? Someone was doing the wheels, someone was doing the headlights, somebody over here was doing, air filtration, and no one actually could see that at the end of it, you would not have a functioning vehicle. And I think it was really poignant to call out in large organizations. So hopefully this can help.
So one of the things Andrew mentioned was about, people here using it, people there not, and the disparity in that. And, I think it goes back to a point Ryan made quite early, which is, a bit of a bane. We're all project professionals here. Like we're about to go live in 15 minutes. Oh, has anyone thought about change management?
Yeah.
So, there's just so much about that. We're going from a manual loom to a revolution, right? So there's just an enormous amount of change management that is required. Teaching people how to use the tools, making them comfortable that the tools aren't going to take their job, teaching them how to work together, again, that multiplayer type scenario. Organizations can't afford to overlook that, right? This is a huge change in the way that they do business, in the way that individuals do their job. So there needs to be a commensurate investment in the change management process, and that needs to be an ongoing thing. This is not a couple of 1-hour sessions this week. This is an ongoing change in our ways of working, and there needs to be the training and the support, the leadership.
I think there's a benefit though
in
in LLMs and in the fact that AI is so prevalent everywhere. It's not as opposed to a business where you get a brand new business tool and it's very specific, maybe not just to that business, but not everybody's going to use Microsoft Project back in the 90s. Not everybody was using that, but it's also something that's very specific to a business. Whereas with the popularity of the AI and the LLMs is people are used to using it now, not just for their business. They're using it for their home. They're using it for on their walks to look at things. And I think the training issue, you're absolutely right, David. Everybody's got to spend the time doing it. But I also think it's probably a lot easier to get people using it. And really it comes down to, I hate to say coming back down to the prompt guru, but it really does come down to somebody who is going to lead the discussion and lead the training so that everybody feels very comfortable working with it and that it doesn't get too locked down. Because if they lock the tool down, and this obviously gets in a little bit into governance, but if they lock the tool down too much, then people won't use it because they'll just use their own on their phone and what have you. But if it's everybody's aware of how to use it and they do see the benefit, I think that's where you can find some synergies.
The most interesting thing with the adoption of AI, and as I said probably in the previous podcast, it's been led by the individual. It's the enterprise. The enterprise platforms aren't leading this revolution. It's the individual use cases of AI. And until the users see benefit in using an enterprise system, that it'll continue to be fragmented, and then you lose the opportunities of sharing data and information.
Correct.
Because the user will go into their ChatGPT or their local instance. One of the things that I've seen with organizations is the users are frustrated because the organization change processes take 12 months, 24 months. The technology's already moved, and people are like, well, I'm just going to use what I used before. Why would I bother to use an enterprise system? And then that just more and more fragmentation, different answers, different results.
Yeah. So I did some research on social media feedback about LLMs, and obviously there is lots of feedback for and against. But in my opinion, the undeniable win for LLMs in project management is to bring together disparate data sources and align them, and using those LLMs to analyze the context for better assessment. of the present and the future, isn't better outcomes and decisions are that we can make that we can't see with the human eye. And that for me is what is most powerful. I think that the red flag is that it will only ever be truly powerful when we can break down some of the barriers from an industry adoption perspective. So for example, when we consider people like Bent Flyvberg's analysis of the reasons for project failure, we can see that issues like complexity and interdependencies in IT projects and the lack of reference class data. Projects are all really big things, but in both of those examples, they require broad data and broad knowledge, and that means environment wide and even industry. What are the elements? They give us the opportunity to harness that breadth, but the present commercial constructs don't. And there's obviously, is there a preference for small language models at the moment? I don't know if anybody out there is actually building them. Do you know of any examples, David?
Not so much. I do know some, very large organisations, and when I say I know of some, it's public knowledge of some large organisations that, that have had a crack. Some of the investment banks in America and things like that have done that. Still interested to understand, obviously fine tuning is a concept within AI. You take an LLM and then you just, sort of filter it, for the want of a better word, down to the subject areas that you're looking for. But building an SLM from scratch is still an expensive exercise, right? That training and inference and things that you need to do to the data, not even, and that's assuming that you've got that beautiful, clean, single data silo type scenario. So no, haven't heard much about that at the moment. Most of the organisations that I'm dealing with, or the company I work for is dealing with, definitely still on the LLM roadmap.
And I'm going to make one last point about ethics, because I think this is a really interesting one. When I stand back from my industry, I believe that the most unethical thing that we can do is to continue to waste taxpayer money by not addressing the challenges of project delivery and the mistakes that we make and the amount of money that is wasted. And just as an example, yesterday I was doing some research for a totally different activity, and I discovered that there is $3.7 trillion invested, capex funded projects across 4 countries. And what I found interesting about that is, once again, if you go back to Bent's research, which indicates that IT projects, 18% are likely to never deliver anything of any value. And then you've got the fat tail issue, which is you can't even forecast how far over budget they will be. That is a lot of wasted money, from a commercial perspective, as well as these government projects. So is it unethical to continue in that way, or do we just accept that and continue as we are now?
As soon as if you're talking government projects and this kind of thing, as soon as you find, I'm going to say, the magic bullet of everybody's using this LLM to communicate, or they're dealing with it from that perspective, you are immediately, more than likely, putting people out of work. And government especially is a little bit more hesitant to do that than others. And yes, there is the opportunity to train people to do other things, that they can make use of that. But people are relatively stubborn, especially, and I'll say at least from the Canadian government perspective, some people are extremely a different thing. They've been doing it for 10 years. They've been doing it for 20 years. This is the way it's going to be until I retire. And regardless of the push to use these tools differently, if you come up with that, really replace everything, but here's the new enterprise tool. I mean, how many enterprise tool implementations have failed? Perspective. From the government project perspective, if you were to imagine a government project where they put in and they said everybody's going to use X tool to do it, there is the opportunity for an LLM purposely, but to actually raise that, not necessarily, they're using it for responding to clients, or they're using it for other purposes. So that
yeah.
And look, I think from a government perspective point of view, I'm not sure that LLMs can solve the problems that slow down those projects. It's bureaucracy, it's departmental communications. It's political
Votes.
sometimes.
Correct.
I'm not sure that these are problems that LLMs
Yeah.
can solve. To be honest.
And I think I think I want to be careful with this whole concept of government, because in my experience, government does not deliver projects. Government issues funding for somebody else to go and do it. And what they are meant to do is manage that contract. So the contract states, I want this capability either for government or for constituents. I'm going to send that out to market. Market's going to respond. Market actually delivers. It's not the government itself. Its government is just managing a contract. Is that everyone else's interpretation of this? Yeah. And so what's actually
government has to manage, though, their internal project process. So depending on how you approach it, right? They're going to manage the contract, but they're also going to manage the system that manages the contract. They're also going to manage the way that is going to be awarded to whoever. There are a lot of systems that, yes, the market is going to be building the building, or they're going to be doing the infrastructure project, but there's still a lot of systems that are inside the government that are used that could very well benefit from some kind of standardized place. And David, you mentioned about how LLM's not going to solve the delivery from a government perspective, because a lot of those things end up being arbitrary standards that come in, or standards that are brought in that are 10 years too old, and they're still forced to maintain them. And those are the headaches. And an LLM can actually help that, because it has no problem filling in the bad data or the old data, the old format that needs to come. So I agree that the projects themselves, as they go out, as they get farmed out of government, but there are still perhaps too many programs that are still managed directly within, which is where they could benefit from.
And look, another factor, I guess, I know someone who worked for our tax office here, IRS, if you like, whatever you want to call it, in Australia, and he was talking about the fact that they're going up against large international corporates for certain tax thing. There's been a lot of stuff in Australia around should social media, where are they paying their tax, or are software companies paying their tax, and such. And a comment that was made to me was, their lawyers are probably earning more in a week than the ATO lawyers are earning in a year, right? And they'll have a football team of them, the large corporate, whereas the ATO, walks in with two or three, right? And the grad with the wheelbarrow of documentation behind them, type thing, right? So, that's the other thing, right? These large organisations that are doing a number of these projects, they're far better resource than the governments that they're doing them for, right? So that makes it difficult as well.
A great argument for an SLM, though.
Absolutely.
If the government departments start building their own LLM or SLM for their business, maybe then they'll actually be able to lawyer up if they need to.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good. So I saw some research that LLM market is projected to expand from USD 6.4 million in 2024 to USD 36.1 billion by 2030. So how do people feel about those figures? Do we feel that that's realistic?
I was reading an article the other day that said that 36% of the S&P 500's value is tied to this AI hype, the cycle. So there's a real risk that those valuations never come to reality, and we deal with this subsequent crash in the stock market. I'd be interested to know, those valuations require cost cutting of some description for those companies to spend that much money. Where's the cost cutting coming from? Is how's it going to happen? I guess is my question.
Yeah, I'm
I
not
don't know
convinced.
you.
I have visions of the Simpson episode where they're pulling the wires out of the wall after the internet bubble bursts, sell the copper. It's interesting, right? There's a lot of consolidation and such that's going to obviously occur in the industries. It'd be nice to be able to predict the future.
And the cost for a lot of those businesses, you're talking about cost cutting, but the underlying cost, that really hasn't hit them yet. They start off with, we're going to link over to a ChatGPT, or we're going to link over to this. And they start off and it seems fairly good, but you're going to be offering a product that's going to do some AI work and you're charging $250 for the year, but your data costs and your token costs, if they actually start using it, are going to go skyrocketing. You don't have a business. You really don't have a business. So it really comes down to, I think it's not the individual, but the companies that are actively using these products to recognize that it's not going to be, oh, everything's just lowered in price automatically just because we're using AI. It depends on how they're integrating that work with them.
Very good points. If no one has anything else, we might move on to the AI news roundup. Yeah, awesome. So just giving a bit of a shout out to Greg Lawton, because he is a very learned man. And Nodes and Links, his organization over in the UK, has just released their book called The Physics of Project Management, where he has written down the maths behind project acceleration. So that launched last week, I believe, and they also released a whole heap of videos, explainer videos that talk about the maths behind project acceleration. Time magazine unveiled the Time 100 AI list for 2025, and it's an annual list of the 100 most influential people in AI, highlighting leaders that are shaping the field. Notable inclusions were MIT's Regina Barzilay for AI in disease prediction, Qualcomm's Cristiano Amon for Edge AI advancement, data workers advocate Milagros Miceli, and Senator Marsha Blackburn for AI policy efforts. OpenAI plans a major AI data center expansion in India. So they obviously reported building a 1 gigawatt AI data center in India as part of their global Stargate infrastructure push, marking a significant step in Asia's AI growth and competition with US tech giants. And Anthropic settled an AI lawsuit. So AI company Anthropic reached a settlement in the copyright infringement case over its Claude model, signaling potential shifts in how AI firms handle training data and creator rights amid ongoing lawsuits. Any thoughts on any of those?
Happy to start. Yes, I saw that our friend over at Oracle became the richest man in the world for 15 minutes or so.
Yeah.
Based on AI data centers. So good on Larry for that. So that was really interesting. I am a little fascinated about where we're going to go with copyright and LLMs. I think that's an absolutely enormous question out there. Obviously, again, the big corporates are going to be fighting that hard. But I see that Penske, who own Rolling Stone and Billboard or something like that, they've just kicked up a lawsuit as well against someone, I've forgotten who, for copyright infringement. I think that's certainly a monster lurking on the horizon. Because going back to my comment about large organisations and government, these are large organisations against large organisations, right? Yeah, this is going to be pinstripe suits standing off at 20 feet, that's for sure. So
It actually reminds me a little bit of the discussions that I'll use the US as the example, but other countries end up complaining about with China's regard to copyright. Right. And the way China takes on a lot of these things, and they build knockoff products, and they take that information, and basically that's just the way it is over there. And now that's kind of come home to roost with the AI going out there and training itself on, or looking at all of this vast amounts of data that do exist. You're talking about these large organizations versus the large organizations, but there is a mirror. they can look at exactly what they've done in the past and see that's going to be a problem from, it was going to be a problem then, it's going to be a problem now. It's just that the players have changed.
My challenge with this whole copyright argument with AI is the way that AI learns is not too dissimilar to humans, right? So if I'm a human, I go to seek education, I learn inputs and I collect inputs across my life and use those inputs to make decisions or information. My question is, how is that any different to what an LLM does in terms of sucking data in to come up with ways of thinking or decisions? So that's the fundamental philosophical challenge I've got with the copyright debate with AI.
I'm with you 100%, Ryan, because it is one of those things where if it comes up with an idea, do you come up with an idea? Is that because of something that you've read? Absolutely. I mean, so now you get into, do you provide recognition of that idea when you come along? So I agree. I mean, it's, people do it. All you're basically doing now is having another tool do it. So if you were to hire an intern, and the intern where you said, go read all of the information you can about this, and they come back and tell you all of this, well,
Correct.
copyright information is only valuable if it gets published. But if you publish it, it's out there.
Yeah, spot on. I've got a couple of others. So China accelerates its AI chip production. So Chinese chip makers aim to triple the AI processing output by next year to compete with the US, focusing on advanced semiconductors and escalating tech rivalries. Goldman Sachs forecasts a surge in AI investment and deals. So the analysts are predicting a wave of AI-related business and spending in the second half of 2025, driven by infrastructure needs and market growth, despite concerns over consumer trust and energy demands. The US Space Force embed AI in their operations. So the US Space Force plans to integrate AI tools across daily activities, enhancing efficiency in space domain awareness and decision making. AI discovers potential archaeological sites in the Amazon, so using satellite imagery, LIDAR and AI, researchers identified 67 possible ancient hotspots in the Amazon, demonstrating AI's role without the fieldwork. And hacker exploits Claude for cybercrime. So Anthropic revealed a hacker used its Claude chatbot extensively for tasks like identifying vulnerabilities, writing malware, and crafting extortion messages, raising alarms about AI's misuse in crime. Melania Trump launched the Presidential AI Challenge. So the former First Lady announced a nationwide contest for K-12 students to create AI projects addressing community issues, promoting youth engagement. And the Boston Public Library digitized its archive with AI. So it's partnering with Harvard and OpenAI. The library will digitize 19th century documents using AI to enhance their metadata and searchability for public access. Any thoughts on those?
I just have an issue all the time when they start talking about the Claude scenario where the hacker used Claude AI to figure out extortion messages and the like. People are doing that already. They're doing it manually themselves. All Claude did was make it a more efficient message. But they've been trying to make more efficient messages designed to fish people in for years. The difference is they have another tool to do it. But it's very similar to when you opened up a Word document and all of a sudden you wanted to use another word and you used find and replace, and it replaced it. It's just better now.
Yeah.
So the argument that a lot of people make about how, oh, well, AI is being used for marketing and it shouldn't be used for marketing, or it's being used for this. Well, no, it's just replacing the people that are doing it. We were talking earlier on about, is it going to replace jobs? The people that seem to be crying out the most about it are the people who actively were doing exactly what the AI is now doing, or the LLM is doing for them better.
Yes.
But they're the ones that are decrying it.
Yes.
Because they don't want to be the ones put out of a job, or at least be revealed that that's how it works. If you're going to create an AI or an LLM to create extortion messages, then the companies that have email systems should use an AI to detect these extortion messages, or people should build an agent to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've noticed, I believe my phone is doing that now. It's telling me, and even with calls, I'm getting, with the spam marketing calls, my phone will now tell me this looks like a spam marketing number. Go there, but I think it's part of the hype cycle. I'm thinking a similar thing, Andrew, with the Boston Library digitizes archives with AI. Well, no, you don't. You scan stuff, right?
Yeah.
This is not new. This is not new, people. So sure, all right, AI for metadata enhancement, but again, there's been tools that do metadata on scanned documents for a squillion years. So yeah, I just think it's now ham sandwich with AI type thing, right? It's like everything's going to have some AI with it.
The AI washing that we talked about last
That's
episode.
right.
It's all AI washed.
Exactly. It's all AI washed.
Boston
Or-
Library wanted to make sure they were front and center in the news. How do you make sure you're front and center in the news? You throw the two letters into it, and now you're going to be on the news.
That's it. All right, just any key takeaways, guys, before we wrap up today?
Look, I think as I say, I was really on board with the small language model a while ago, and really promoting that internally within our special interest groups and such that we have within our organisation, talking to our sales people and others about where AI may be going. I was really on board with that a while ago, so I'm excited to see that sort of coming back in vogue, for the want of a better word. But I'm now very keen to also understand how that might be implemented, with RAG technology out there, with fine tuning of LLMs. Are we going back to building our own specific models, which, as I say, at the moment is quite expensive, but with all this investment in data centers will no doubt become cheaper over time, as it always does. Or are we going to sort of continue on the path where we are with the RAG and the fine tuning and coming up with these sort of subject area language models? I think that's fascinating at the moment.
Ryan?
Oh, for me, as I said earlier, it's just this AI hype cycle. Where's it going to go? Is it all overvalued? Can we turn the hype into reality? I think that's where I'm really focused on at the moment with all these technologies.
Yeah, and my big thing ends up being similar to what we were talking earlier on about, where people are really coming down hard on the LLMs and comparing it to other things, saying, well, it's not perfect, but it's just as perfect as we were talking earlier, somebody who goes out and reads something and comes back to you. The difference is that it's been able to read a lot more information than we have. And what it comes back with is what it's been given. And if you've been given a lot of information, that's its only way it can do it. So you want to complain that it's not going to get the whole breadth of the world around it. Well, that's because all it can do is read. Give it some more things it can do, maybe it'll start doing more. But right now, all we've given it is we're just going to feed you digital information. So we can't really complain about it not being able to do more if we're not going to give it more.
Well, that's a wrap for today on Powering ProjeX. As we close out, a big thank you to Ryan, David, and Andrew for joining me and their expert insights. And thank you to all of our listeners for tuning into this episode of Powering ProjeX. If you found it valuable, please do subscribe, share it with your community of project professionals, and leave us a review. Your engagement does help us reach more people just like you who may benefit from the community. But don't stop there. Engage with us, share your challenges and successes, and let me know what further you would like for us to cover. And if you have a suggestion, comment below or email me at poweringprojects@gmail.com. It's DK, Milo, Ryan, and Andrew signing out. The content provided in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute professional, legal, or financial advice. The opinions expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of any affiliated organisations or sponsors. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information on project management methodologies and related topics, no guarantee is made regarding the completeness, accuracy, or applicability of the content to your specific circumstances. Listeners are encouraged to consult with qualified professionals before making decisions based on the information shared in this podcast. The hosts, guests, and producers are not liable for any losses, damages, or outcomes resulting from the use of this podcast's content. By listening to this podcast, you agree to assume all risks associated with the application of the information provided. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you'll find value in our discussions.